during its live coverage.
This is how desperate the Iranian propaganda machine is. It is now getting its goblins to tweet about the USS Liberty.
Let's suppose that this punishment that Iran is delivering every evening
He's like,
for 5 nights, maybe for 10 nights.
I think you're losing, aren't you?
Well, the BBC is not allowed to broadcast from inside Iran, but our colleagues at BBC Persian have been keeping across the situation. Farham Gabadi has this report.
Iranian state TV came under attack during its live coverage.
This is how desperate the Iranian propaganda machine is. It is now getting its goblins to tweet about the USS Liberty. This is a tragedy that occurred in 1967 during the war with Egypt. An American naval warship drifted and appeared in Israeli waters, and the communication between that ship and Central Command wasn't very good, and the Israelis panicked and basically bombed it. And they bombed it so badly that a lot of American soldiers ended up dying. It is considered one of the greatest naval tragedies in American history. And because this happened about 60 years ago, the people who obsess about hating Jews are obviously never going to let this go. So we constantly get reminded of this, and especially by the people who love Palestine. And so we constantly have to deal with the stupidity of Americans trying to illustrate this as some kind of reason to hate Israel and Jews because of one mistake that happened 60 years ago. So as we can see, if we look through all of these posts, these are all just pure propaganda. Every single person that is writing about USS Liberty, like the JFK assassination and 9/11, and then there's Sam Tripoli is obviously referring to these three events and then posting it back to Laura Loomer because Laura Loomer is Jewish. Yes, that is how the minds of these people work. USS Liberty was attacked by Israel. They are not our friends. 60 years ago, Israel attacked Americans on USS Liberty in cold blood. Imagine not knowing about the USS Liberty. Iran is a wise country and won't attack US bases in Middle East. Great, yeah, nice Slavic free spirit. Israel is we're a psychopathic country, even though statistically speaking, most Israelis and Jews are not likely to commit violent offenses or behave in a psychopathic manner, and will attack US bases in the Middle East with the intention of false flag, as it has already done with the USS Liberty, and many times after that. Not our war. Not one drop of American blood was spilled for Israel or any other nation. Like, these guys are such losers. Like, every one of these people, I would really like to know, like, how they're paid. I want to know how they coordinate so well, because this is clear coordination. Somebody told them, hey, write about USS Liberty right now, and we'll make it trend. This is what they do. You see it constantly with all kinds of progressive positions. That like these threads just appear on Twitter where literally you have like 100 content creators all talking about the same thing at the same time. And this is obviously what's happening here. And it's gross, and everybody just gets so upset with it, and yet they keep doing it, assuming that for some reason they're going to eventually, I don't know, I guess brainwash us into believing this garbage. Because that's what this is. This is just pure garbage. This is garbage. If you ingest this kind of propaganda, you will get dumber. Now, speaking of dumb propaganda, why don't we watch a video that George Galloway just put up? This guy's a real winner. We can take a look at his Twitter really quickly. And he just put up a video, and we will go over it. Let's start it from here, because this is a really long and boring conversation, and only parts of it are actually entertaining. So I kind of just fast forwarded to the entertaining parts where he isn't complaining about how he's in a bunker and how the Israelis are terrorists and they killed 65 innocent people, and how they're targeting innocent people. Okay, so let's just start from here and we'll see what he has to say, because he is talking about a lot of boring stuff just prior to this, and he just covers it all again anyways, because all he's doing is complaining about Zionism and the American government, and how no countries want to help Iran, and how the countries who do want to help Iran aren't really helping it, they're just doing it for money, and how Iran is standing up against the whole world by itself, and how Iran is not an ethno-supremacist state, even though the Persians in it typically live much better lives and are in much higher positions than any of the minority populations. So let's start here.
Governments in the region, but there are other governments. The Russian government has a close relationship with Iran. China also. The BRICS countries, with one or two exceptions. To what extent is the regime change operation being mounted against Iran a part of the war against the BRICS?
I think it is a part of that. But I also think that the Israeli regime is something very special to these supremacists. The United States, the elites, and the European elites are captured by Zionists and neocons. And we see that as we speak, they are sacrificing Ukraine for these Zionists. They're taking away the air defenses of Ukraine for this Zionist, for this ethno-supremacist, racist, and genocidal regime. And they have destroyed Ukraine. They have used it as a tool for many years, but
Putin's not
3 or so years
for
it's
that
been
at all.
devastating to Ukraine. And after all the sacrifices that Ukraine made, and after being destroyed and wrecked, they just dump it and take their toys elsewhere, their tools elsewhere, to support this ethno-supremacist genocidal regime. And I think that's a lesson that
Isn't that exactly what they did in Iraq?
That should teach the Ukrainians not to trust the West, but it should teach the rest of the world that the West doesn't care about anyone. They'll use you and then they'll throw you away when they have other priorities. But the collective West is doing everything that it can to help this regime. When the regime bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, France, Germany, Britain supported the bombing of the embassy. And now that they're bombing Iran, again, these European companies are supporting aggression. They're supporting attacks on nuclear installations, where if there is leakage, many people could die.
No.
They support it.
No,
nevertheless.
they're not
Why?
plutonium.
Because they don't care about us. We are
It will not create the
Amalek,
kind of fallout that he's
George.
talking
We are
about. He's
all
lying.
subhuman to these people. In fact, the reason why the Minister of Defense of the Israeli regime can say, I'm going to burn Tehran, I'm going to burn Beirut, or the Dahia Doctrine, or they speak about mowing the lawn in Gaza or burning Gaza. The reason why they can say this and no one says anything about it in the West is because it is acceptable for them. It is okay for them to do that because we are inferior beings. That's just the state.
No.
That is the reality.
No.
So the liberals in the United States and in Europe, they speak about 1,001 genders. But when it comes to genocide and ethnic cleansing and the Holocaust in Gaza, they're fine with it.
Isn't it interesting how he doesn't seem to have any clue that those 1,001 gender people are actually the pro-Palestinians inside of Western cultures? Isn't it kind of ridiculous how he thinks that those are not the people who support him, who are actually marching out with Iranian flags and humiliating themselves in front of all of us? Isn't that curious? How the master propaganda chief is actually ragging on progressives right now? I find this hilarious.
Men can go, they will defend the right of men to play in women's sports, but they will not defend the children of Tehran who were slaughtered.
We don't want the women, we don't
Lebanon
approve of that
who were
either.
slaughtered simply because Hezbollah was trying to draw forces away from Gaza to protect Gazan children. They will not do anything to support the children of Gaza because we are all Amalek, because we are inferior. When there's a chosen people, that means the rest of us are not worth much.
That is ridiculous. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Number one, the Persian people are not Amalek in the Torah. The Torah actually speaks quite highly of the Persian people, and especially King Cyrus, who ended up freeing us. So Mohammed Murandi does not know what he's talking about, unless he wants to claim that he's like a Philistine or a descendant of the Philistines, which many Palestinians actually happen to be. He cannot be Amalek. So why he is referring to Amalek here and trying to purposely twist things is because he is the IRGC propaganda chief. That is why he says these ridiculous things. Let's continue with your propaganda, Mr. Murandi. Like, even George is like,
the president
okay.
of Israel, Herzog, who posed at the beginning of the genocidal attack on Gaza, signing bombs with a grin for the camera, is considerably more sad today as he talks about bombing residential areas. How piquant is it to discover that Israel's command and control center is literally underneath a hospital? How piquant is it that the Iron Dome missiles are actually being fired by Israel from narrow residential streets,
you mean the hospital
using their own
to
people
the Pentagon
as human shields? Irony of ironies, surely.
Yes, but that is, for us, it is outrageous that the Western media will say nothing about it. They'll keep quiet. But
because it's
when
not the same
Netanyahu
thing.
for nearly 40 years has been saying that Iran
It's
is
like
on
having
the
a
verge
hospital
of
wing at the
developing a
Pentagon.
nuclear weapon. Iran
And
is
that's what
weeks
they're
away,
complaining about,
months
that they
away,
built a
a year or two
hospital
away
connected to
from
the
developing a
Pentagon.
nuclear weapon. The Western media will not tell people that he's been lying
really
for
small.
decades. Every time he makes a new claim, he'll say the Israeli regime sees it as I say regime. That Israel sees it as Iran as an existential threat. They won't tell people that this is just a lie that they've been using all along. Western governments, the Israeli regime, Western think tanks, and they won't tell people that the facilities that they bombed that are linked to the nuclear program, all of these buildings that they bombed or are attempting to bomb, or these underground facilities which they can't have access to, all of them are regularly visited. IAEA inspectors visit these buildings, and they have never said that Iran has moved to develop a nuclear weapon. The board of governors of the IAEA is a political body, and it is dominated by the West. Whenever they are nearing a deal with Iran, they'll behave better. Whenever they want to put pressure on Iran, they'll rehash old accusations. So the political body and the head of the organization, which is under Western control, like all international bodies that were created post World War II, they will say what the United States wants them to say. But none of the technical experts have ever said that Iran is moving towards a nuclear weapon. But this is not something that Western media will say.
IAEA said
like
you're enriching uranium at an alarming rate.
CNN and other outlets speaking about the children in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, where just a short distance away, they're starving. 1 million children. They are starving a million children.
No, they're not.
The hypocrisy of
They
these
have
journalists.
aid there
the
now.
hypocrisy of these governments. The hypocrisy of these
You're like
NGOs.
getting your
These
information
human
from
rights NGOs. The hypocrisy of the whole Western political establishment is mind-boggling. But it's something that we have to get used to. And Iran is going to resist. Iran will not allow them to overcome. Iran will not allow the Israeli regime to succeed. And hopefully, even though Trump has been hypocritical and he's been deceitful and he's been a part of this aggression, hopefully he will not get involved directly, because that will lead to a global catastrophe. That will lead to the destruction of these Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf that host US bases. So the smart thing to do for Trump is to distance himself, and in fact to put pressure on his allies, his genocidal allies, and to be careful, because this could lead to a catastrophe where the entire world is affected in a way that would be far worse than 1929 and the 1930s. But in any case, whether the United States gets directly involved or not, Iran is going to punish the Israeli regime, and the Israeli regime is going to pay a price. Iran will force the regime to regret what it did. And ultimately, I believe this is what is going to lead to the fall of Netanyahu. Even though it's not going to change the regime, because the fall of Netanyahu is like Nazi Germany without Hitler. It's like ISIS with Abu Bakr Baghdadi. It's like Al-Qaeda where Jolani becomes Shara al-Shara. There's no difference. But I think that Netanyahu has gone too far, and he has effectively destroyed the Israeli regime, because the Israeli regime will have to face humiliation. They have shown that despite the entire West supporting it, they are completely vulnerable to one country, and that is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Islamic Republic of Iran will not relinquish the Palestinian people. It will not forsake the Palestinian people, and it will continue to support them until they're treated as equal human beings, and until you have equal
Now
rights
you know where
for
this
all
Free
people of
Palestine
Palestine. Something
movement
that
is
in the
really
West is
about,
outrageous. Human equality in the West is outrageous, and that is why we're so evil in their eyes. But that is a day that is approaching, God willing.
Let's suppose that this punishment that Iran is delivering every evening
He's like,
continues for 5 nights, maybe for 10 nights,
I think you're losing, aren't you?
maybe for more. If Trump picks up the phone and says, look, I think this has gone far enough, let's return to the status quo ante, meet me in Oman a week next Tuesday, what would the Iranian response be, do you think?
I don't think it's going to be like before. The situation has changed, and the Iranians will have new demands. The equation has changed, George. You know this because you've lived through it. You know it better than I. The Israeli regime has never been humiliated like this before. Every night they're vulnerable, despite the fact that the entire NATO apparatus is there, and they've given up the air defenses of Ukraine and left them to be attacked in order to protect their ethno-supremacist genocidal monsters. Despite all that,
I think they
they're being
took one
humiliated
bad
every
battery
night, and
away.
today they were humiliated
Literally, like,
during
one.
the day as well. This will continue. Iran will push this to a point where the regime recognizes that this was a catastrophic mistake. And I think that is already happening. We are already seeing messages coming to Tehran from the French president, the Emir of Qatar, who is in their camp, whose air base is being used by the Americans to help the Israeli regime. And also the Americans are sending multiple messages to Iran that we are not a part of this, we had nothing to do with it. Whereas the Iranians have evidence that and it is clear that they were involved. And even Trump's statements on the first day indicate clearly that the United States was involved. But the more recent post of Trump seems to indicate that things are not going as well as planned. And that despite the initial shock that they hope to impose on Iran and cause some sort of collapse, that has not happened. And that shows the strength of Iran. That
They
despite
said it
the
would take
collective
weeks
West
when they started
supporting
the
this
war
act of aggression,
to topple you.
that
They said
Iran,
weeks.
within hours, was able to regroup, and now is going to gradually turn the tide. They are carrying out assassinations in Tehran and elsewhere using drones. They are being supported by the West and Western intelligence agencies. In fact, the methods that are being used against Iran are identical to the methods used to strike the strategic bombers in Russia. The same people who organized and worked to bring about that operation were involved in preparing for these days in Tehran. And I think that is very telling.
Now, you don't make these decisions any more than you make any of these political and military decisions. You are an academic.
And a propaganda master.
An extremely persuasive one, which is why they might try to kill you. But it seems to me that the case I've been making, and which you have contested several times, that Iran, like North Korea, is a country that simply must arm itself to the extent of its technological and scientific capability. Otherwise, it can forever fall victim to these kind of sneak attacks. The Israelis do not declare that they are thinking of using a nuclear bomb, but they have them, and they could use them. But you are, as a matter of policy, political, theological policy, have set yourselves against the acquisition of nuclear weapons. Do you think that calculus might have changed at all as a result of this week?
It is changing the mood in Iran, there's no doubt. And ironically, George, Trump has done more than anyone else to push Iran closer to a nuclear weapon. It's Trump's doing. The Iranians have always disliked weapons of mass destruction. You know the history. During the war, when the West gave Saddam Hussein chemical weapons, I survived 2 chemical attacks, both mustard gas and a nerve agent. Others didn't, and others are still dying as we speak, a very slow and painful death after decades. Iranian politicians and military officials went to Ayatollah Khomeini, Imam Khomeini, and asked permission to produce chemical weapons. And he said no. He said, this is a horrible weapon. And they didn't do it. And afterwards, the current leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, said the same. So that is a moral issue and an ideological issue. But the problem is, there's also another problem, and that is that if you build a nuclear weapon, then you encourage other countries to follow suit and also to build nuclear weapons. And we have neighbors, Central Asia, the Caucasus, West Asia, and this could create a much more dangerous environment. So the preference is not to have a weapon. However, when the United States is threatening Iran with destruction, when the Israeli regime is threatening Iran with destruction, when you see a racist, apartheid, genocidal regime that has the full support of the West, that has no red lines. It has no red lines because we're Amalek. We are worthless to them. We are worthless people, and the West is fine with that. That is why they allow them to starve Gaza. They help them starve Gaza. They're doing it together. They're helping to destroy and bomb Gaza. You see British intelligence involved. You see European nations, none of them will sanction the Israeli regime because they're in bed with these genocidal maniacs. So when there are no red lines, the argument among many in Iran is that for survival, we have to move in that direction. So they're tilting the balance of power, or the balance, let's say the balance of in the argument, or the power of one argument over another. They're tilting that balance. They're tilting the debate in one direction. So Trump himself, through duplicity, through dishonesty, through brutality, through supporting death and destruction, through murdering Iranian children, and through threatening Iran, and through the airstrikes by the Israeli regime against Iranian citizens, Iranian civilians, and the Iranian nuclear program, they're pushing Iran in that direction. And ultimately, if it becomes an existential threat, then Iran's nuclear posture will change. And this would be something that I think would be very unfortunate, but I believe would be necessary.
Well, I know I speak for all of our audience who value you so highly, that we pray for your safety and urge you to find another way of keeping in touch with the media. Change your phone number, do whatever is necessary, because there's not two Professor Mohammed Murandis. May God preserve you. Thank you very much for your time at this extraordinary moment in your country's history. Professor Murandi, God bless you. Professor Said Mohammed Murandi, Professor of English Literature.
Did you catch the part where he actually thinks that we are upset that the Ukrainians hit the Russians with those drones? Do you see how their propaganda machine isn't quite as well oiled as they think it is? Unless they think that progressives are actually pro-Russia. I mean, a lot of them are communists, but for some reason they don't like Putin, even though Russia is probably the prime example of how communism actually works. They are no fans of Russia. They back Ukraine. The progressives back Ukraine. It's also funny that he's talking so poorly about men in female bathrooms and all the things that progressives do, when in reality, those are the people marching for Palestine. That is how clueless a lot of these people seem to be. It's like they don't even have a cohesive idea of who their allies are over here, or who is arguing for them, or what is even going on. That is how ridiculous it is. Now, while he is a master propaganda chief, it seems like he doesn't have all of the facts, which is ridiculous, because he's supposed to be the master propaganda chief. That is how disorganized all of this feels. I will let the video finish off here. I just wanted to show you guys some of the ridiculous stuff, the desperation that people are going to in order to try to paint Iran as the winner here, or as the party that's doing better in this conflict. And I think anyone with a brain understands that it's not in a good position right now, and that this man was actually speaking from a position of desperation. So, if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and you can help me produce more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.